Doug, you're not 20 anymore. Like you're working out, like, like you don't have to lift that much weight in deadlifts. You don't, you don't have to do all these things to your body. Like science is showing us 3 days a week is probably, you can probably get away with 4. When I think about it, it was almost like that. Oh yeah, I forget that I'm 48. It doesn't cross my mind ever unless I have to talk about my age. And I think a lot of men are like that. We forget that we haven't worked out for a while. We forget, or we choose not to recognize that our body has changed. Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of the TPM Show. Once again, we are joined by our special guest, Phil Batterson. Phil has got a PhD in exercise physiology, as well as a whole long list of credentials. And guys, if you haven't listened to the podcast I did with Phil earlier, we talk about where Phil's torturing me. Go back and listen to that as well, or at least add that to the queue. This one's going to be a standalone. Phil, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me back, Doug.
Yeah, I'm glad you're here, man. So I'd let our community know that you were going to be here and just ask them, hey, what are some of the questions you guys have? So I thought I'd read one of the questions and we can just riff off that.
Yeah, perfect.
So this one's from Todd. He said, says, Doug, the one that interests me the most is the strength and conditioning coach, which you have a background in. I'm doing many things to move the needle in other areas of my life. Good job, Todd. However, as I age, my body gets stiffer, and not in the ways I enjoy. I'd love to learn daily and weekly habits that I can make a routine and ideally take half an hour of my day, if that's even possible. What's an optimal fitness routine for the average person?
Yeah. So I'll say this to start out. If you're just getting into exercise, sometimes doing less is actually better. Because if you just jump in full bore, an hour a day, 30 minutes a day, those sort of things, your body may not be prepared to recover from what you're putting it through. Even though you're like, oh, well, back in college, I used to, lift 2 times a day and I was drinking, drinking three times a week. And now maybe you're just drinking 3 times a week and you're doing 0 exercise per day. Do the least amount of work you can do to get the most amount of gains.
Yeah.
That's ultimately what it comes down to. You're looking for minimum effective dose, and aches and pains, a little bit of soreness, that sort of stuff is normal when you first, start exercising again. But if those like aches or pains don't go away after a day of rest or a couple days of rest, then chances are you probably did something that was a little bit too much for you. So I wanted to start with that.
Sure. So when you talk about just starting, because I know what a lot of these guys are thinking, right? No, I'm not just starting exercise. I used to work out all the time, not college, but 6 months, a year ago, 2 years ago. How does somebody know when they need to reset that clock?
If you can't remember the last workout that you did, like the day you did it and what you did for that workout, chances are you probably need a little bit of a reset.
Yep.
So coming back, like the good news is that you can do very little to start gaining fitness back. So whether that's strength, whether it's cardiovascular fitness, if you're working on like mobility, sounds like, Todd had a little bit of, like joint stiffness and other things like that. The good news is that, even working like, 30 minutes 2-3 times a week, we'll start pushing you in the right direction. So yeah, I would say it's always okay, to get to totally reduce, to 2-3 times a week when you first start getting back to something. So if you're 6 months out, just start there and then you can always build up. The bad thing is that, and I see this with a lot of endurance athletes I've trained in the past, they get it in their head that, oh, to be a successful endurance athlete, I have to run every single day. So they start that. They have really actually positive experiences with good improvement in performance and other things like that. And then 2 months down the road, 3 months down the road, everything falls apart.
Yeah.
Because they didn't put structures in place for them to balance the stress of exercise with the extra recovery that you need. Because you have to remember that when you're adding exercise to your life you're increasing the amount of stress you're placing on your body. And yes, some people will say, oh, well, like exercise is a good stress. Your body doesn't differentiate between, like, say, a good stress and a bad stress. And I'll put those in quotes there. It just knows how much stress am I dealing with and how much stress can I get rid of on a daily basis through recuperative time, downtime, sleep. And I know when you're a businessman who is hard charging, wakes up super early in the morning, has kids, has a spouse that they're a relationship that they're also trying to foster, that stress bucket can almost be overflowing.
Sure.
So you need to be able to balance that first and foremost, and then you can build from there.
One of the things I think a lot of people miss, right, is that recovery period, right? So I'm not saying this will be Todd, but I've been guilty of this, of going, okay, Phil's saying three times a week is good. Well, shoot, I'll do 5, right?
Right.
And then we miss the sleep because we have young kids, and then well, geez, I really need to lose 20 pounds, so I'm going to go in a caloric deficit, and not just any caloric deficit, but I'm just going carnivore diet, and we don't need to talk about specific diets, but I'm going to go in such a caloric restriction that my body's not going to be able to recover. I see this all the time with people, and I've done it myself. What would you say to the guys out there that are like, okay, I want to get in shape, I'm motivated, and they're kind of the all or nothing personality type?
If you're truly motivated and if you're all or nothing, go all in on the workouts that are prescribed, the 30 minutes, and then go all in on the recovery. Like, that is something that people, like, they're like, yeah, like, just give me the workouts. I'm just going to crush the workouts. And then they just say, screw it, no recovery. If you're truly all in, then you're going to do both of those tasks. You're going to go balls out in your workout, and you're going to go balls out in your recovery.
Yeah.
So show me first that you can do that, and that you can improve each week just based off of 2 or 3 workouts a week. And then once you've kind of earned that check mark, then you can graduate to 4 days a week. Maybe it's Monday, Tuesday, rest day, Wednesday, then Thursday, Friday. And then if that goes really well and that fits with your lifestyle and you can recover from it. And here, the biggest thing is that exercise should facilitate your ability to, have good relationships, do better at life, do better at business, be more available for your kids. It should not hinder it. So that is the number one thing, is like, after you've gotten, 2-3 weeks into your training program, if you're exercising so hard because maybe you have this like relationship with exercise that's like, I just want to punish myself.
Sure.
And it's hindering your ability to do all those other things I just described, then you're probably doing too much.
Yeah. I've been guilty of that, man.
You're looking at one that's, I fall into this trap way too often.
Yeah.
But use it as a calibration tool.
Yeah.
And then having a coach as well, to pull you back and pull the reins, because humans are awful at knowing what they can do and how long they can do it for. Like, we're really good at overestimating our capabilities,
or thinking we're different.
Yeah,
Right?
Exactly.
I don't need that. So I was doing CrossFit 5 days a week, 5 in the morning.
Yeah.
Right. And I was getting up at 4 because I had one time for a while I was getting up at 3:30 in the morning.
Oh, man.
Because I had other stuff to do
Yeah.
and getting it done and being optimal. And I would do that. So I'd miss my sleep. Nutrition, okay. I was okay on that. But the other recovery methodologies, I just threw them out the door. It's like, okay, something's got to go. That's the recovery stuff. So now I have a torn rotator cuff, arthritis, all of these other things, which is a setback. Then guess what? I started gaining more weight again. Now I'm in this cycle of, okay, now I have to go balls to the wall to lose that weight so I can crush my VO2 max because I'm competitive.
Yep.
I don't think I'm alone in this. I think there's a lot of men that are out there that, once we decide, hey, I'm going to go for something, we go all out. And what you're saying is, cool, got you, but go all out in the recovery.
Yeah.
What does that look like? Like, what would a non-workout day recovery versus a workout day recovery look like?
Yeah. So I always like to end a workout with 5 to 10 minutes of walking either on a treadmill or if you can get outside because the weather's nice, and just like doing some like box breathing, you know, so that inhale for 4 seconds, hold for 4 seconds, exhale for 4 seconds, hold for hold at the bottom for 4 seconds, because exercise is inherently a stressful activity, and the best people in the world, right? These like, you know, professional athletes, they're the best at actually transitioning from the hard work to the relaxation. And I think a lot of the times, like, especially, you know, like with really hard charging individuals, we're always in this state of like mild stress throughout the day. And if my PhD taught me anything, it's actually that like continuous drip of stress signals like in the body that are actually leading to very negative and deleterious outcomes. Because exercise should be this like massive spike in stress, and then you should immediately go back. It's kind of like, you know, if you were like a primal man, you'd run from a tiger, or you'd run toward an antelope trying to kill it. You'd get the antelope and then you'd rest, and you wouldn't have anything anymore. So that's what that's in my mind's eye, that's like that transition point is really important. And then also, you know, like if possible, having ways of then transitioning out of that stressful situation towards the end of the day. Say you put the kids down, say you and your wife like to watch, you know, like a show or something like that. First and foremost, don't have a TV in the bedroom, because that is like it's screen time, getting inundated with things that are like kind of stressful, like those sort of things. So keep it out in the living room. Once you watch your show, get up, and then have some sort of like, you know, box breathing routine, stretching routine, something like that. It doesn't even have to take it like, you know, 5-10 minutes, but it's just it's a transitionary point where hopefully by this time, you know, you're starting to wind down from all the emails, all the dings, all the buzzes of the world, you know, social media, you know, like the emails, the fires that need to be put out, work. But that's what I mean by recovering hard. And then also on top of that, like I think another really good way is just, you know, like having protein, right? You know, protein is the building blocks, you know, for the muscle you're trying to build. When you are doing cardiovascular work, your protein is actually used to repair all of the little, you know, gears and mechanisms that are allowing you to actually use oxygen and propel yourself, you know, on the treadmill, on the bike, those sort of things. And you need protein in order to do that. And if you're not giving yourself adequate protein, you're essentially stacking a Jenga tower higher and higher. And what happens to a Jenga tower if you don't replace the blocks at the bottom?
Collapsing.
It falls over. So protein are those blocks, and they actually allow human body's amazing because you can make a Jenga tower, but you can also replace the bottom blocks because you can resynthesize more. So yeah, does that make sense in terms of like the recovery aspect of things?
Absolutely. So I know some of these guys out there, they're going to be like me. They're going to be like, okay, but where's my ice bath, my sauna? Where do my foam rolling fit in? Where's the gadgets?
The foam rolling. I use foam roller every single day. And you know, whether you want to argue about it scientifically or not, if it's like getting rid of adhesions, whatever, it is a way of having a routine to get yourself disconnected from all the stress and all the busyness of life. The ice bath, is actually an insanely high acute stress. And I would say probably 99.9% of people do not need it. Because the people who do need it are the ones that are, you know, like in the CrossFit games and need to recover really, really fast between, you know, say like 2 workouts that they're doing. There is, if you do an ice bath far enough away from bedtime, you get this huge spike in stress. So if you've ever done an ice bath, it feels really good when you get out. It feels awful when you're in it. You're like, you know, like you're trying to calm your breathing, do this other stuff. But the reason why it feels good when you get out is because you just released a shitload of stress hormones. And if you're already dealing with a shitload of stress hormones because your life is stressful, then doing something along the lines that's just going to be more stressful, I don't know if that's, normally I don't recommend it to people.
Are you reducing inflammation? Are you that whole idea of like contrast showers or flushing blood in and out of the muscle cells and tissue?
I think for, you know, if you're working out 3 times a week, then you don't need to worry about that.
Yeah, but I can buy an ice bath. I can't buy a workout.
Yeah, I know. And you know, I would say it's if you find the benefits may extend beyond physical benefits.
Yeah.
So you may have, like, a lot of people I've talked to who are like really preachy about ice baths. I'm not. Are like, well, it really helps me cope with with stress better. Yeah, because you're putting yourself in a really stressful situation. Cold water is stressful as shit.
Well, you also can't. So I have an ice bath, and for me, you can't focus on anything else.
Yeah,
you're not like thinking about the emails at work or things like that. Like, you're in there, you're almost in a meditative state.
It's like a forced meditative state, right?
100%. Yeah, and you're doing breath work at the same time.
Yeah. So from that perspective, I think, you know, from like the mental perspective, it could be beneficial. I just think that, like, you know, if you don't have one right now, like, use your bathtub. Like, I use my bathtub, and the water gets cold enough that, like, you know, I can cope with it. Yeah. But don't think that is going to be a cure, end all be all for, you know, like your exercise. It doesn't replace exercise.
Hey guys, I just want to share something with you. I'm sure we can both agree that in order to fix something, you need to know what's broken. And not only need to know what's broken, but a step-by-step methodology on how you can fix it. That's the easiest way to do it, right? Otherwise, you're going to be toiling with things. That's why I created a free training, a training that not only shows you how you got to where you are, where your relationship is missing that love, respect, admiration, and even intimacy that it used to have, to how you get it back. How do you retain that where your wife's looking at you the same way she used to look at you when she said, I do? You know, I don't know about you, but for me, when my wife looks at me like I'm her man, that I feel like I can conquer the world. And I want that for you. Simply go over to thepowerfulman.com/scales. That's thepowerfulman.com/scales. And I have a free video training for you. You can just click play and see if this resonates for you. Now back to the podcast.
Where there may be some benefits is sauna.
Yeah.
So if you do have a sauna, you could use that on off days for 20 to 30 minutes. Doesn't need to be a crazy long amount of time. And there's definitely been shown to be cardiovascular benefits for that. There was just recently a study that was published. They were looking at older men, but I imagine it probably applies to like sedentary individuals as well, where they did 3 sessions of sauna throughout a week, I think for 30 minutes. Probably really hot, so it was not comfortable.
Yeah.
But they showed increased like capillary growth and cardiovascular benefits and those sort of things. So it is a way of kind of like adding extra, you know, like stress, because that's, again, your body only adapts if you have stress on it.
Yeah.
So it's a way of adding stress, but to say that it's going to be the same as exercise and a well thought out exercise plan, you can't compare them.
Yeah, no, I'm thinking about it from a recovery aspect.
Yeah. So from that perspective, like, you know, again, I think it's more along like the mental side of things is, you know, like you go in, that's the only thing you can think about, you know, psychologically, it's probably decent because, you know, you're having a pretty big spike in stress, and then it's going away because you're taking yourself out of that situation. But from like a physical perspective, I would say most people you're not doing enough to warrant, you know, like a NFL ice bath, you know, sort of thing.
Sure.
Because those guys are getting clobbered all the time.
Yep.
They need the ice bath because they have acute trauma to their body. That's like, you know, because a Mack truck hit them.
Yes.
But for the regular everyday person, I would say use it more of like as a psychological tool rather than thinking of it as a recovery tool.
Okay. So going back full circle, we're talking about, hey, double down on recovery. Start off maybe 3 times a week. And that recovery looks like optimal sleep. We teach the men something we call the alpha decompression routine.
Okay.
Which is a way of resetting after work. Like, so you don't walk through the house as the guy you are at the office, right? A lot of guys fall into that. They start treating their wife like an employee, their kids like employees. They're in that mental state of just stress. So decompressing from that, doing breath work, which we teach the men to do as well. Get the TV out of the bedroom. That's the biggest sex and intimacy killer there possibly could be. And then just really getting yourself in a state of recovery.
Yeah.
And focusing on that and getting your protein in.
Yeah. The recovery starts, with the brain.
Yeah.
Because if your brain if you can perceive that you feel comfortable, then your body, the rest of it kind of follows suit. So yes, that's what, it sounds very simple.
Yeah.
Just do 10 minutes of box breathing and walking, after your workout, do what'd you call it? The alpha.
We call it the alpha decompression.
Yeah. Alpha decompression, like after work.
Yep.
My fiance and I call it bridging activities, where, you have we're both entrepreneurs that work out of the house.
Yeah.
So it's hard, to then transition sometimes. So we're like, okay, well, what's our bridging activity today? It's taking the dogs for a walk, going out and feeding the horses. It's, just walking around the property. It's doing those sort of things. So you're, separating, kind of like the stress of the stress of work, and then being present, actually in life. Cooking for me actually is a great kind of bridging activity when I'm not super busy.
Yeah. I can see that.
Yeah. So it's those, and then, focus on, your kind of adequate calories. So you first and foremost, if you're in a calorie deficit, but also trying to build muscle, it's going to be hard.
Yep.
But focus on protein, upwards of 1 pound or 1 gram per pound of body weight. There was somebody else who actually commented you were reading that increased their carbohydrates as well, and was actually able to decrease their body fat percentage by 10%, gain muscle mass at the same time. So think about macronutrient distribution. If you're doing hard exercise, you absolutely need carbohydrates in order to facilitate that high intensity exercise. And if you're always reducing carbohydrates, you'll lose a bunch of weight in the beginning because you'll just lose it as water weight as you burn off a bunch of carbs, and then you dissociate the carbs from the water. But you will definitely lose the ability to do that high intensity stuff as high intensity as you should be doing.
Oh yeah. When I was doing CrossFit, that I was telling you in the morning, there's a guy on the platform next to me started doing the carnivore diet, and he just boinked. He couldn't do it. Right. And so I felt for him. I've done the carnivore diet myself. I've done all kinds of things. And you do. There is a time when obviously you go through ketosis, and it's a whole nother methodology, or, you're not going to hit optimal levels.
Yeah.
But for some people, especially obese people, that could be an option for them, right?
Yeah. Yeah. It's, all of this stuff is highly individualized, is what we talked about in the first podcast. And I've done the ketogenic diet, and it was the worst thing possibly for me.
Yeah. For me.
I'm a high stress individual who does high stress exercise, kept doing the high stress exercise, couldn't eat enough calories. My testosterone was down below 200.
Yeah.
And
wow.
It's I couldn't sleep well.
Yeah.
I always felt like shit because I was just overdoing it and under fueling.
Yeah.
So it didn't work for me, but I've also met people who it works tremendously for them.
Yeah. We don't have to go down the nutrition rabbit hole.
Yeah. Yeah. But I'm just saying nutrition is an important factor here,
100%.
But it's all about focusing what are the biggest rocks we can turn over?
Yeah.
So from a nutrition standpoint, eat the amount of calories that you need for whatever weight management, weight loss, weight gain goal that you have, eat enough protein to facilitate that, and then eat enough either carbohydrates or fats, depending on the exercise intensity that you're actually doing.
Love it. So what I'm hearing you say is I don't have to go to the gym 7 days a week for 3 hours.
No.
It's so funny. So I started working out with one of the guys that works with TPM. He's one of our advisors, and he happened to relocate to Sisters, Oregon. So we hit the gym, 4 or 5 days a week, depending. And one of the things he said to me is man, I have friends who are, quote, he has legit fitness influencers, he's they give me workouts and they're 2 hours long. And you and I are in and out of here in 45 minutes. It's so much more enjoyable. And I think people don't realize, unless you're a fitness influencer, your testosterone goes down after 45 minutes. You start to go into a catabolic state. All these other bad things happen to your body, unless you're truly a high-end athlete.
Yeah, or feeling yourself within the workout as well, right?
Yeah.
it's the law of diminishing returns.
Sure.
You can get probably the most benefit out of the first 30, 45 minutes. And then after that, it's kind of like, plateaus in terms of benefits.
Yep.
Obviously the higher end athlete you are, the more you probably have to work, but that also comes with the recovery aspect of things.
Yeah. You need more stress. Yeah.
So I would say just to kind of go back to, it's like you can probably gain a lot from 3 days a week. What we're working on, you did a VO2 max test. We identified that, you're not doing too much cardiovascular work. So, and from the little devices we put on your muscles, we recognize that your mitochondria actually aren't able to extract as much oxygen as we would hope for. Yeah. So using kind of all of that information, what I prescribed was 4 times 30 seconds on, 2.5 to 4.5 minutes off.
Yeah.
And those 30 seconds are as hard as you can possibly make them.
Hill sprints, right?
Hill sprints.
Yeah.
So that's a 16-minute workout.
Yep.
And then you get to go to the gym and reward yourself for doing that.
Yeah.
By doing strength training. And I think for most people, doing, whole body strength training 3 days a week, and then, like 2, I wouldn't do many more than 2 high intensity or sprint interval training days a week. That's a really, really good place to start.
That's a great place. Yeah.
Yeah. You could probably do that for a really, really long time. And as long as you are progressively overloading, which means increasing your weights, getting faster, maybe increasing the amount of reps sprints you're doing, you could probably improve for, a year, if not years.
Yeah. I mean, I have a friend who's got she's got her doctorate in exercise phys, but also a doctorate in physical therapy. Mm-hmm. And I was talking to her because I recently had an MRI on my shoulder, and she goes, "What are you doing?" I'm like, "Well, what do you mean? What am I doing?" She's like, "Doug, you're not 20 anymore. Like you're working out, like you don't have to lift that much weight in deadlifts. You don't have to do all these things to your body. Like science is showing us 3 days a week is you can probably get away with 4."
Yeah.
And I think when I think about it, it was almost like that. Oh yeah, I forget that I'm 48. It doesn't cross my mind ever unless I have to talk about my age. And I think a lot of men are like that. We forget that we haven't worked out for a while. We forget that there's limitations to our body, or we choose not to recognize that our body has changed and things have changed. And for this gentleman, like saying, I feel stiffer. Well, you're working at a desk more. Are you hydrating? There's all these life changes that have come about where you're going to be stiffer than you were probably in your early 20s.
Yeah, absolutely. It's the stiffness thing is challenging because, like you said, it can come from a ton of different things. Yep. But I would say that it also, like moving your body, also acts as kind of like lubrication for your joints and those sort of things. So on like those off days, so if you're going Monday, Wednesday, Friday to the gym, or just Tuesday, Thursday, to the gym, you're doing your sprint interval training, then you're doing some whole body, compound movement strength training. On those off days, try to park a little bit farther at work. Yeah. If you're an executive at the office, I totally understand you're super busy, but it means a lot to your employees for you to walk around and not being like, what are you doing? But just like talking to them, right? And being human.
Sure.
And that also gives you the benefit of actually being able to move and, get some steps in or treadmill desk.
Yeah.
Those are also great. You don't have to do 8 hours of treadmill desk a day. Start with 10 minutes every 2 hours.
Yeah.
Because that's at least breaking up that sitting sedentary time.
Yeah, I do with some of my coaching clients. I'm always on the treadmill, or I do what's called walk and talks. I just jump on a phone call. You got to go walking. I'm going to go walking.
Yep.
You have an Oura ring on. I have an Oura ring. That'll tell you like, hey, stretch your legs a little bit, right? Whoop bands do something similar.
Yeah, I think Apple Watches do as well.
Yeah, so there's a lot of devices that you could set for yourself, or set an alarm. We all have smartphones these days.
Yeah,
set an alarm for every 45 minutes or whatever it is to get yourself moving.
Yeah. Yeah, it's it really is like, it's like the more we talk about this, I'm just like, the simpler it is, the more implementable it's going to be for your life.
Sure.
Like I think another one of the reasons why I am like kind of hesitant on things like cold plunge and ice, or like ice baths, saunas, those sort of things, is because they also are just like challenging in a sense.
Sure.
Which it's okay to challenge yourself, but it's, on like the hierarchy of things, like ice bath and sauna are probably like pretty low on the totem pole.
Sure.
Whereas like all the other things like we talked about, like making sure you're developing yourself cardiovascularly, like just that in and of itself will, as you develop your VO2 max, so like the ceiling of your aerobic capacity is going to make you feel better throughout the day, because now everything you're doing isn't 75% max effort. It's 45 or 50% max effort.
Sure. I love it. Man, thanks so much for helping out the guys and the movement and everything else that you're doing. If guys, we'll put it in the show notes we did last time, but if guys want to follow you, I know you have a podcast, I know you're on Instagram. What's the best way for people to find out more?
Reach out to me on Instagram at Dr. Phil Batterson. I also have a podcast called Critical Oxygen. It's got about 100 episodes. It's primarily geared towards high performance athletes and those sort of things, but also super nerdy science talk. So if you are into that and you just want to learn more, listen to that while you're going for your daily walks and stuff like that. I think it provides tremendous value for people. But again, it is kind of derived for that high performing, like say triathlete, endurance runner, like those sort of things. Yeah. I'm here to help, whether you're starting from zero or, kind of pursuing any of like those big goals, like hiking a mountain, doing an Ironman, doing other things like that. I have tools in my toolbox that can help all athletes, businessmen, whoever it is. And my goal is I just want to help the individual who's in front of me.
Love it. Awesome. Well, guys, there's a lot of information there for you. And if you're like most men, you make things overcomplicated. Like, some of us will go, hey, I need to get the ice bath before I can get started, or you add too many things to your routine. I get it, right? I'm one of those guys too. But you want to start. And I always say, hey, in the moment of insight, take massive action. So write down what is going to be your massive action step. Maybe it's just getting started. Strap on the shoes and go for a walk. Call an accountability partner, right? Have somebody else, but especially another guy in the movement, that you guys just go for a walk and talk. You just talk as you're moving your bodies. Or maybe you're training for your Ironman and maybe you need to back it down a little bit, or work with somebody like Phil to actually help you hone in those things. But whatever you do, take action, do something, even if it's the smallest micro thing you can do, because that's going to give you momentum. As always, guys, thank you for being here, and we'll see you next time on the TPM show.